you got a little think tank going, and what we sparked in that last conversation was really interesting. Identify like, oh, it's not black and white. Oh, there's all these different gradients in there. Allows us to take more time and to say, okay, yeah, actually, let me just think about this for a second, that reflection. What is this? Is this actually, coming in to for example, with bad intentions, like you said, or is it coming in on this higher level of organization taking place in the universe
Mhm.
where reflections of ourselves are showing us different aspects to truly learn a deeper layer, really trying to figure all that out. I take the time to contemplate and to like introspect and like, okay, what exactly was that?
Mhm.
But being challenged when we have really strong triggers, I think is important. Like that's where it really comes in handy when the triggers are really strong. I thought we'd listen to what you said quickly.
When somebody says something to us, now I'm seeing it spiritually. Like it could be, a test, or it could be actually, on like I said, on a spiritual level. It could be because we made certain decisions that are not in line with ourselves, which gives certain power, well, certain dark forces to come in and tweak us, tempt us, or, so wow, like when you look at existence at that level, it's not just your mental. Well, yes, there's still got all your mental thoughts, but it's a it's more challenging this way. It's like, did this person truly want to influence you negatively, innocently? Was it sent by something else, or is it just a test in the end for you? To see, and you have to. We need to have that discernment.
So yeah, there's a few things that you touched on.
Hmm.
You touched on the test, right? Is it for my own growth leading to the challenge? Then you touched upon decisions that we potentially make that are out of alignment, I guess, with what we know to be the right action, that then get reflected back to us, that show us where we're out of alignment. It's then we're feeling these darker forces and we're like, I don't like that. That's not, that's coming in and that's not what I want. Why is that coming into my reality field? It really having to do with decisions that we made prior that allowed that reflection, that projection to happen. And then actual bad intentions, like people who are out of alignment themselves, and then projecting those dark forces. And then if you're in alignment, you just feel it as, projection, a negative influence
Hmm.
that you have to navigate through. And then the last comment was to do with discernment.
I guess this just kind of touches upon, now I'm truly understanding better what the Hermetic principle meant. Everything is mental. This really encapsulates that, because it comes in through thoughts, whether projected, you invited, or some of the forces is still coming in as a stream of thought into your consciousness. And then what you do with that then creates your reality. So this is the first time I'm really like, okay, okay, feeling it in my body. Everything is mental.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, we can decide based on this energy how, again, how we create our own world, how we react to it, and how we create the next step forward. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We do have a certain amount of willpower. I could say that when we're in lack of awareness, then we lack the feeling that we have a choice. If we don't know ourselves that well or we're not really paying attention, we might not be aware of certain thoughts that we have, or they just come in as reactionary to the point where there's no in between state of observation and then where we could make that choice point. It's just like thought, reaction, thought, reaction, thought, reaction. And then that discernment is blown out the window. And that's, I think, a phase or a stage of development that we all go through. I would say going really, really deep into this, it would be connected to like our root race origins. Some of the primal thoughts that come out are connected really deeply to ancient times. And so a portion of our thoughts, we don't even, a portion of the thoughts could be related to that. And then another portion of the thoughts are related to stuff we're just picking up on in the environment. Subtle cues that we're getting from the environment, things coming in through, we can go into all the frequencies, radio waves, right? We can go into
Voice to skull.
yeah, the voice to skull technology. I mean, there's stuff like that too that's really out there, but there is a portion of our, the stream of thoughts that come in. There is still a large portion that doesn't belong to us at all.
Yeah.
If you start meditating, you start really paying attention to every single thought. You're like, wow, what is that? That is not me. That is like, and it's just also the subconscious mind trying to make sense of the world and all these things that it picks up through movies, through, different conversations that we have, just that, ticking that's happening in a really deep primal level and trying to make sense of it. And so, and then we have that portion that we're dabbling in now, which is really the portion that we're more aware of, more conscious of, that moves through our minds, through interactions, when we're interacting with people, let's say the highlighted, more like the louder voices in our head, that we can really pick up on and identify. Those are the ones that we're talking about. And those thoughts themselves, we broke them down and we distinguish why they're important, because all is mind, as you mentioned, and we're creating with this, and there's free will involved. So in order to create and to, make use of that universal law, that first Hermetic principle, all is mind, then we have to be able to discern. And so in order to discern, we have to know, for example, what is a test? So this is what this think tank is about, like breaking this down. So for you and your experience, how does a test be acknowledged in your mind?
I'm not sure how to answer that question because it's slowly starting to come into my awareness. And when it comes to tests, I think it was actually you who brought it up, that concept to me when I had these to me, there were crazy dreams that I felt like I was being attacked. And then just understanding or having that possibility, like introducing that possibility to my mind that, what if this was a test? Okay, so I took a completely different outlook. So my energy field changed. Instead of being kind of in a fear, I'm protecting myself because there's something attacking me. But then it's more like, okay, well, if this is a test, then in order for me to pass a test, then I need to be more, I need to be stronger in my belief, stronger in my boundaries, knowing what I want and what I don't want, and reinstating that in my conscious mind. So that, because my understanding is that in the unconscious, because in the dream world, I'm not very good at it yet, but I think it goes onto your subconscious. So whether you think you're strong, but if you don't affirm it enough and practice it and feel it in your energy field, in your body, truly, not just saying it, but owning it, like sort of the horse would know, do you really mean it, or are you just saying it? No, having that stronger field. And then the minute I started doing that, slowly my dreams start to change. It was so fast. I was so amazed. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, I have the power to change these things, even though you think, dream worlds is another story. You have to have a different capacity. But at the same time, if in your reality, living world, you have the same stance, then I think it'll just permeate throughout the rest of your
Yeah, that's
year.
really well said. Yeah, it's like to have the awareness of it. I think that's the first part is like, oh, even just questioning, could this be a test? Right? That gives us a level of power because it's no longer something just happening to us. It all of a sudden it becomes something that maybe we're producing ourselves. And then there's like this self-ownership and
Victimhood
this,
to empowerment.
yeah, exactly.
And I don't know what it is for other people, but for me, when you just said it, the test, and I was like, oh my God, I didn't see it that way at the time, but right now I just see it. It is the same parallel as the victimhood, moving out from victimhood to you're being attacked, oh poor me, to you know what? I'm not letting this happen. I've seen enough, I've endured enough, especially during the stupid past 3 years. Like enough is enough. Like I don't want more of this bullshit, whether in my dream time or in the real time, out. I want that out, and I'm creating something else, something new, and the rest of that is gone. Like I no, there's no more
Mhm.
tolerance for that, and I think that, and sometimes perhaps for me, I don't know for other people, I need to cultivate anger. I'm so smooth and so gentle. Like I need some of that energy, and it's like okay, no, no. Wait, I don't, and I say it out loud. I told you, I don't consent to this. I don't know what is trying to come through, but I do not consent to this. By saying it out loud, it's that has that vibration in it. So it helps me.
I think that's where a lot of the females look to the men,
Mm,
especially the warriors,
mm,
right? To really get that strength. I know that myself, yourself included, a lot of women like, especially during 2020 and all that, but really reached out to like men in order to get that
mm,
energy that is that masculine outward. It's a pushing energy that says like no, it's like this creating space and creating boundaries around the self, applied in this situation of the mind is it's the same thing really, to be like no. It does take a certain amount of anger,
yeah.
um to help move out of that total powerlessness. But I think the first part that's even more important is the awareness, because if you go about life, let's say people are, you know moving about and having all these different thoughts and encounters,
Mhm,
right, with either aspects of their own mind, fears, that they're holding on to, that are deeply embedded, that are obscured from conscious awareness, and then they show up in dreams, or they show up in different, expressions that feel like they're happening to us. um, that's where it becomes really, just the awareness for people. Like if you don't even question it to begin with, then you can't do anything about it. So that's I think the first step towards like becoming empowered is just the questioning of it, is like, oh, is this what it is, and not taking it at face value and starting to look at what these thoughts are and where they're coming from.
mhm,
And then that second part, I would agree with you, is the anger is really about saying, okay, I'm not going to be in this fear victim mentality. I can actually get a little angry about this. And when, or a lot angry about this. And I think that's where that cathartic work can come in. The cathartic work being cultivating the anger in a healthy way, through dance, through music, through vigorous activities. It could even be through rough play sports or wrestling, or, for women, I think it's a little different. We don't have as many channels
mhm.
for cultivating healthy anger that are accepted, like, mind you, there's tons of women that go to the shooting range and shoot guns and and do boxing and
I think
but
I'm gonna pick up again doing chopping the woods. I live in the forest. I used to do it. Now we don't do it anymore. I think I'm gonna go back and do it now.
yeah,
It's amazing because you have to let go, right? Yeah, I literally sometimes have to jump to get that energy going. It's like ha! And when you hear that splash, that hit, oh, it's marvelous. Yeah, thank you for reminding me that.
yeah, yeah, that's
Mm.
it. Getting out there and just doing physical activity in the yard. There's enough activities out there to
Mhm.
kind of get those juices flowing. And then that when you have in combination with that, and then the focus on what it is that we're trying to break through within the self, within the mental structure, the thoughts, the beliefs, blah, 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 combining those two activities and then really focusing that aim. Like you're like, as you're chopping the wood, you're like, okay, I'm going to break apart this, whatever thought that's constructed of fear and um past pain. I think a lot of it is, related to, of course, conditioning, childhood trauma, all of that stuff
Mm.
that becomes the shadow, right? It becomes the shadow
Right.
in the subconscious mind. This is where it gets interesting. Like decisions out of alignment, attracting dark forces or projection. I guess that it can also be put in a category of if we haven't healed our shadow.
Mhm.
So if we're out of alignment, it's also like we're living in shadow. Like we haven't healed that, so it's our shadow is controlling the vessel.
My mind is going somewhere else right now. I just want to give some tips, perhaps, because it's just, I'm sorry, I'm kind of slightly going tangent, but I'll be right back.
Yeah, yeah, do it. That's it's
When
free
you were
for all.
talking about getting into sort of, when we get triggered and we go into this reaction, and then it kind of cycles and it continues and you trigger the other person, and it's like, I just have this image as you were saying that it's like, I could almost just see like a jester in the background enjoying this whole process, because every time we're being triggered, there's these negative emotions that gets generated, within our field, within our emotional body, and then out into the field. So they're actually, I'm just getting upset now because I'm like, oh my god, every time this happens, they're laughing their ass off because they're harvesting this energy. They want you to be in this energy. So it's as if, again, maybe whether it's be a test or not, or it's in, for the negative forces to come in, you're also, you fall right into this mind trap, and then they're harvesting you. So I mean, for me, it's like if I have that imagery of something or someone harvesting my energy, that's like, okay, that's like a trigger and awareness. So like, stop, you have
Mhm.
to be aware of what this is,
Yeah,
where.
and also that ties into, instead of it being like something's there harvesting, it could also be, what are you feeding?
Mm.
What forces are you feeding? Like, you always have that, like the white wolf and the black wolf, one on each shoulder, the two angels, the angel and the devil or whatever. There's been all these different analogies, but like, what are we feeding? Again, it's not something maybe happening to us. It's something that we are totally, as powerful creators, are doing um, and contributing to.
Or which part of ourselves are we feeding? It's actually within us. We have light and dark within us.
Because really, at the end of the day, like I came to this conclusion a while ago when I was interacting with someone who was really triggering me.
Mm.
And I felt from my perception that they were out of alignment and their intentions were negative. Okay.
Interesting. Yeah.
And when I was experiencing this experience with them and getting angry at them and starting to feel all these emotions rush up because of the how their words, how I was perceiving their words, and then what that was producing within my own psyche, right, was triggering. And I felt like, okay, this person is actually, they don't have my best interest in mind.
Mhm.
And I realized at that point that it didn't matter whether they had my best interest in mind or not. What mattered in that moment was that my thoughts, because of those interactions, I was producing negative thoughts and I was producing like a negative talk, right? Where you start feeding into that energy and you're like angry. You end up having an argument in your mind with that person
Mhm.
because at the end of the day, these thoughts are going to cycle through and have to be released completely or integrated in by integration, understanding where they come from, right? And So that process, as it's happening, I'm realizing, who am I really talking to? And who am I really affecting here? Me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Me,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it was better in that, I realized in that moment that it was better for me to do the work of forgiveness, going into that area and then having that conversation. And even if the conversation is only with yourself, that level of forgiveness, right? And saying, okay, I'm not, what I'm perceiving from you is actually that you're not in alignment and that you actually don't have my best interests in mind. But I choose to forgive you. Right. And I know that I have that self-awareness. I know we all have those levels within us, the subjective pockets within our mind, which we are going to perceive something that's not there at all.
Yes. Oh yeah.
And so in those situations, I'm like, well, we all have them. And so if it was that, and it wasn't actually someone coming in with bad intentions, I am still correcting the issue within myself
Mhm.
to release that. Right. So there's the responsibility comes back onto the self. We take back the power
Mhm.
and we take back our sovereignty.
Mhm.
But if it keeps on coming back, I think it's like a feeling in the belly. This is where it can go into the body, intuition in the belly,
Mhm.
intuitive feeling. That's where I feel, I'll have to just stop communicating with that person
Mhm.
because I'm like, okay, I'm doing that internal work, but something just keeps on coming back
Mhm.
and gnawing at me from the inside. Like it to me, that's really where that discernment comes in. It's through other senses, not just what my mind is perceiving.
Mhm.
Because the
And
mind can perceive a lot of things.
and when you say discerning, that's when you it comes in, you feel it in your body. You mean discerning between whether it's just a test or whether it's really some negative forces or whether is that
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm pretty, I'm a Libra ascendant, so I often will extend myself longer than even necessary in situations to really see, is this really just something on the outside that doesn't have my best interest?
Mm.
Because we never want to actually feel that, and no one wants to feel that, like, oh, this person, is just totally either apathetic or totally, selfish, whatever, wounded from childhood, going through something, right? It could be a lot of reasons.
Mhm.
Or is this just me and my own wounding
Yeah.
or shadow? But that feeling in the belly will give it away over time.
But wouldn't a wounding also feel like that? Because it's like if somebody is triggering without even realizing, well, or I mean, we can turn it so many different ways, or something else is sending that energy through, something is sending that energy through this person to get at you. It still, it still triggers you wounding. So the wounding or a negative force inside your body, wouldn't that feel the same? Because I'm not
Yeah.
sure I know the difference.
Yeah. For me, there's a difference. So for me, one of them is the thought will produce the response. So let's say I get the trigger,
Uh-huh.
right? Or there's a thought coming in, right? There's a thought coming in that's triggering. The way that my mind analyzes it is like, oh, this isn't mine. This is bad, right? Just that first response
Mhm.
is going to create a physical response in my body. My body is going to recoil to
Oh,
to that thought because my thoughts are saying that's negative,
yeah.
right? So there's that cycle that's happening. It's like a biofeedback loop that's happening with the mind in response to thoughts,
Mhm.
right? That's why we can make ourselves sick with our thoughts.
Oh, yeah.
But then the other one that I'm talking about, it will come in on this, it's coming in on a different level. It's not even like it's it's coming in almost before the interaction. It's coming in as this sort of global state of picking up with all these different senses. Feels different in my body.
Okay, and again, the second one you described, is that a negative force, or you're just talking about ambient force? Are we talking about malevolence or just ambient collective weird energy?
And you just get a general feeling because
Hmm.
we're picking up on people's core frequencies, right? We pick up like on, so it's more related to that. And then feeling like, oh, there's something that uh, sometimes it's just those two energies don't mesh. There's also just that, there's two, those two, it's like oil and water don't mix.
Hmm.
Sometimes frequencies, it's not that there's anything wrong with the other person or
Hmm.
that there's any major trigger. It's just that the two frequencies are completely different and they repulse each other. So that's one thing. That's one layer to it. And it's like you don't mind, you can interact with them and it's like you can have okay interactions in terms of you have to get something done together, but you just feel like there's something that it just doesn't click. The energies don't go like they don't weave together and mesh together and play together.
Hmm.
They kind of like bounce off each other. But it's all happening on that level, like with the distinction and the discernment between feeling and intuition. It's like it's happening on this very fine-tuned kind of subtle level related to frequency. But usually it's like if you do something wrong, okay, for example, tell me if you relate to this. You get angry at someone for something,
Hmm.
and in your heart really starts hurting, like really, that crushing pain in your heart. Um, and so your body is responding, but over time you realize pain that you felt was really your own anger
Hmm.
at that person. So you know what that is. Like you felt that before.
Yeah, yeah. Coming to realization, yes, afterwards.
Eh?
Coming to realization afterwards, not on the spur of the moment. I don't think
Yeah,
most people can think
afterwards.
clearly, but yes.
Afterwards, and sometimes there could be a little bit of something that else that the other person did in there, right? There could be a little bit of that, but the crushing pain is often like ourselves being out of alignment with how we know we should respond to a situation.
Yes.
And then, yeah, and then really being like, oh, actually, I caused myself all that pain because I didn't follow through with authentic expression. I didn't forgive them. I didn't put in the effort to say sorry or to rekindle conversation.
Hmm. Hmm.
You know, that's what happened to me last weekend. And I realized after it was more painful to hold on to that. And then when I finally went to see the person the next day, I'd been mulling over it, thinking of mulling over, is this my shadow? And we had all this conversation too about the mind and the discernment between the thoughts. And so I was really like, is this a test? Is this a trying to go over everything? And then I realized at the end of the day, it was a complete miscommunication.
Ah.
And there was probably things in there that were actually pertinent to my own development
Mm.
that did cause a trigger. And there were things in there that were actually from my past
Ah.
childhood that
Yes.
were causing a trigger. But the majority of the pain that I felt was due to my choice of reaction towards that person.
Okay.
That was the majority of the pain. The triggers actually weren't that painful. They were like 20%, but the
Hmm.
80% was
Hmm.
due to the choice that I had made.
And in the end, it's because it's, to kind of put it in different words, is the story. The trigger creates a story in your mind, which is mental, which then reinforces a certain bodily reaction, and then you and I would probably in that case as well, but we then twirl, in that circle, and it's a feedback loop of
Yeah,
this.
it becomes a feedback loop.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why I think if it doesn't, if people don't work on this discernment, that feedback loop becomes
Oh,
a neural pathway,
yeah.
right?
Oh,
And then we get into like PTSD, and
yeah.
we could start discussing these deeper issues of like where patterns are so entrenched in the bioenergetic system
Hmm.
that it's the path of least resistance. So anything close to that trigger that comes in is like boom, it goes so fast around.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's when it's harder to break those cycles
Yeah.
and to break the thoughts apart,
Hmm.
and to really be like, actually, okay, there's, because there's always an array of things. It's like, oh, that was a little trigger. That person probably shouldn't have said that. But then this reaction over here, I had control of that
Yeah.
entirely, that I could have, you know, changed the outcome of my experience of that
Mm,
exchange, um, had I not reacted that way.
mm. I'll give you a very interesting example that was given to me very recently. This is a friend of mine who almost never drinks. Okay. And because he's telling me, he's like, okay, well, how can I put it this way? Like he's been cleaning his body throughout the years, and now he feels more, like it's sort of like the fish in the fishbowl tank. If the water is always clear, then you'll feel the murky right away, right? But if the water is murky all the time, then you don't even know what's causing the murkiness. So that's how I understand it. So he was telling me, he's like, oh, I didn't know what else to do, so I bought a bottle of wine, which it never does. Drank a little bit. Actually, it was stronger than wine. I think it was like 20 odd so percent. It was Bordeaux. So he's telling me, he's like, oh, I thought, might as well drink a little bit. And that's it. And like, it's just because, right? And for 2, 3 days on, he told me, you know what? He felt like his mind would dwindle and start going negatively in a lot of the thought patterns. And he noticed that these are new thought patterns that he generally doesn't have. And then not only that, he's kind of, he said, even in dream time, he's dreaming things are just not his usual dreams. And it all tends to kind of shadowy. He's like, yes, the initial bodily reaction was kind of like that, ooh, happiness. But he says, in the long run, it creates a damper on his emotions and on his thinking pattern. He's just not as joyful. The joy for himself disappeared for a temporary, period of time. It took him some time, like 3 days later, he told me that. I was like, oh my gosh, that alcohol is sort of like this gin in a bottle, this sorcerer or some sort who comes in, and you give him permission to come in and alter your state of being. And when that happens, it's sort of how you called it, having a hole in your auric field, or he comes in and play with you now. So there goes all that mental. This is external.
I've had people tell me similar things. And this person was a very interesting person. He vibrated differently. Like when I looked at his skin, it's like I was seeing the electrons move, like
Oh,
very unique individual energetically,
okay.
and perhaps hyper aware. And he said that he smoked commercial tobacco by mistake once, and he literally felt the next day this like tentacle reaching in as a thought. This is how he was perceiving the thought as a tentacle reaching in through the back right side of his brain and reaching into that, like moving up towards the neocortex. And it was just this voice that whispered, go have a cigarette. And he's like, I've never smoked my whole life. And for him to hear that voice so clearly
Oh,
out of nowhere, yeah, it gave me the shivers when he was telling the story. But he's like, that's when I realized how these substances translate into thoughts, and how they can actually control our thought processes to the point where they're like voices, right? Because our brain, the left, we can go into the left and the right side of the brain, which is like a really interesting topic as well related to this. But you know, the right side is really connected to the body, and the body is being like the cosmos where we're connected to everything, right?
mm,
That right side of the brain. And it's just experiencing. It's experiencing through the body, through all these senses, in totality. And the left brain is analyzing how we're perceiving the world. It's an analytical interpretation. And that's where the thoughts come in. Our thoughts are like the computer typing out what it thinks the right brain is experiencing. So, this beautiful holistic self is here, and then you insert a substance into it, which is a chemical. It's composed of different things, but they're, it's chemicals and electrons, like electricity and all these other things. And that substance then gets translated into, through the left brain, words that then become part of our internal dialogue.
Mhm.
And that's why what you said is really important, because that's where food comes in.
Mm.
Does the food we eat produce certain thoughts in our mind? Of course they do. Of course it does. The alcohol, any substances. This is why natural medicines are so powerful too. Why natural medicines can completely shift our experience of the world, because we're going to experience our thoughts differently. Isn't it powerful? Like, I think, to me, that story and your friend's story is like, it really exemplifies what it is we're dealing with. There's nothing in this world that we can put into our body or put into our minds, right? Because then we could get into TV, what programs we listen to, what music. If I'm listening to whatever, sometimes I'll listen to what I consider junk food. um, and it's probably not junk food for other people, but I will consider it junk food in my on my menu. It affects my dreams. I'll be processing that at night.
Wow.
And if I listen to something long enough, I will start to replicate
Oh, that's for
certain certain thoughts, and then that translate into my expressions.
Mhm.
It's like, if you hang out with someone long enough, you could start talking like them, and you just pick up on each other. And
Yeah, that's true.
so there's that level too. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just add a little tidbit there when you say, for anyone who doesn't know this, such things exist. There's such a thing called the darkness retreat room, which I did for 7 days, which I was fed, so I didn't have to worry about it. There was bath and fresh air circulating. Everything was provided for, so I was able to just kind of live my own experience in pure darkness with myself and nobody else. And like you said, the first few days was really interesting because it was just me, let's just say, in observation of what comes in my mind. And there was one song I remember, I heard it, I listened to several times before because I really liked it, and I couldn't stop hearing it. That's the only. It was like on playback. At one point I was I was so fed up. I'm like, this is the only thing I'm hearing, because in darkness I had no more inputs, and it was like you said, it's this playback, and it just kept going. I'm like, oh my god! So all the thoughts at the beginning that was being hashed out in my brain, in my mind, this mental mechanical process, exactly like this, everything that I just had passed through people who I've been with. And then eventually, finally, I don't know, about 3 4 days, then I fell into this silence. That's when I'm like, oh my god, okay, so this is what experience is if you have no external inputs. It's like it's the blackboard, but now it's a whiteboard, right? It's in pure darkness, but it's the same thing. It's like, well, you get to create, and what are you going to do with that? I went from boredom because I have no stimuli now. I no longer need to react to something, but I need to create. So that was such an interesting move. Like, okay, observing you and what comes up in your mind. And then, the rest of that journey, I think, is very personal. Everybody lives something different. Some people heal, some people, further perhaps create, but usually there's a lot of healing process that comes out of it.
So I've done tests before where I've gone on digital detoxes, and or I'll just stop looking at certain material for a certain amount of time, in order, kind of like when you're testing food allergies, to see how my psyche is going to respond, and to see how my thoughts are going to respond. And, eliminating that is like, oop, all of a sudden that starts to recede because I'm not feeding that stimuli myself with that stimuli anymore.
Mm.
And then um what can resurface in that place is something deeper. Like if you go into sensory deprivation, I imagine at one point, once you hit that kind of that blank wall where your mind is no longer processing the stimuli that you would have been feeding it in the outside world, you start to go inwards, and the journey goes into the body, into the blood, and into the cells, and it gets into the DNA. That's where we can start tapping into things like the Akashic records, ancestral wisdom, these higher states of being that are more right brain
Mhm.
uh, in focus. They're just the experience. Like, you know, the right brain is like being in the moment. There's no planning with right brain.
The way you said it, it's this whole process is, yes, it's about, our physical body is here, our logical left brain is here to serve a purpose, but just don't have it too bogged down so that you can still perceive and take in that right brain creativity experience, and perhaps in a bit of a visionary, see what you want to create in terms of for this world, and bring it to this world and use your left brain to ground it.
Maybe we can end with talking about that a little bit, the right brain development and coming out of this very less dense time in our evolution. And in that state, we're just in the experience. We are a part of it. Just really primal. We're just, you're in the energy. You're not even observing yourself. The left brain starts to observe the self. And that's where we started to break everything down, and then the individuation, and then making choices like, oh, maybe this isn't the right thing to do. Right. So that was a really important distinction that happened. And then it's also just this natural process that we're moving through, where we're going from the right brain to the left brain, and then to this balance between the both. If we're now coming into this discernment, we're like, oh no, this is related to past trauma, or this is related to, decisions I made that were out of alignment, or, actually, yeah, that person is, they're not in alignment, and their intentions, their influences isn't good on me. I'm just gonna, not spend time with them. You don't even have to tell them. You don't have to. This is something I tell people all the time. You don't even have to express that to the person. If you're not feeling it, boom, just walk away. You're out of there,
Mm.
right? Um, and that's where we could take our power back. But the left brain helps us analyze all of that, so that we're not so that we're not just in that right brain response to what's happening in the world, which doesn't help to solve any problems. So coming into the left brain, we're able to discern. We're discerning, we're discerning, we're discerning. We're having these reflections. We're going through this inner process of discernment, sensory deprivation. We're, okay, coming into that awareness, like, whoa, all of that was not even me. That was just the outside world, feeding myself, like feeding my mind, thoughts to process. Now here I am. Who am I? Who am I, and what do I want to create in the world? Right? It's like so powerful when you get to that point underneath all those conditioned responses.
The direction that it is going, it breaks my heart. But then I can't hide myself forever in a space where I think I'm going to be safe, because whether you want it or not, the universe is going to come and get you to, put you back into on course. Usually not in a very nice way, which I experienced. And then I said, okay, fine. Then yes, I have to be back in my alignment, back to what I'm here to do. So the way I see it is like, I know it's kind of cheeky sometimes, like as below, so what is it? As above, so below, as within, so without. So if I want to create the change that it's outside, and I have to create it from inside, and then since I can't do it at that high level on the world stage and whatnot, but if I can do it, I'll do it for my community. So starting within the community, I got involved, and the position for me, it doesn't even matter, but the position itself it's actually very logical, mathematic, money related. It's just to hold on to the purse of the organism. But I'm grateful for my left brain, to kind of carry the functions out, and at the same time to be in a position of power, quote unquote, because we're 7 people who are kind of in charge of the decisions of where the community organization that I'm in. So since we're in charge of where it's going, so it's kind of like that mini microcosm of the world, you know. If I wanted to go into a new direction, then this time around I actually have a say. People who were there grip on to their power, very, very rigid. They didn't want change, they didn't want to move forward. They thought their way was the only way. Power is might and that's it. And there's no cooperation. It's very much sort of what we see in the world. Seriously, it's like, wow, I saw it, everything. It's exactly a replicate of, with their small community, and the outside world is exactly the same. And it's so crazy. Ever since I got in, it's like, the same problems in the world that we see manifesting, um, whether climate change, whether caring for as well as identity when it comes to gender. It's I get the same shocks and conflicts in the small community as well. So it's like it doesn't matter where you are. I think when you are put to the test, or sort of, if I want to bring in the future that I want it to go, we can still influence it. But again, as always, kind of, if I get triggered, which I do in our meetings, then I have to always, like you were talking about, coming back to the center and try to see what's the best way forward. And now I realize it more and more. Everything I say I do, it's like, we do impact the small community and then forward. It's like that pebble in the pond, right? You create that wave, and that wave will go out. So every gesture we do has such an impact. What do I want to create? What wave do you want to create into the world?
Even if you don't have quote unquote a big audience, it's still affecting the reality field in the same way. But people don't, that's a whole other thing that we can get into another time, but people don't even realize that the power that every individual trinity has, right?
Yes.
It's really powerful. And
Yeah.
then you start seeing it reflected back on. Like, this conversation is going to shift the way I experience reality, and I'm going to start getting different feedback from my reality because of it.
And the story I shared with you with the alcohol, it just came in. That was like yesterday or 2 days ago. I was just like, oh my God, uh, came out of nowhere.
Yeah. So the seed concept that you talk about, it's really, it goes really deep, and it is powerful, and we're planting it into the reality field. I know if people do listen to this, they're going to think that's really crazy. But the more you go into the depths of all, like, the right brain, the more you see the power of the sacred geometry with the seed and the thoughts and the ripple, and it's
Yes,
like, we are
I see
creators.
it. Oh my God, I never thought about it that way. Yeah, it is about creating reality, confirming, yeah, the two coming together, and the third in the end, it's a child is a baby, is a creation. It's a creation, it's a thought, it's a seed. It's all just different. You just have to choose the right terminology to speak to different type of people in their paradigm of belief, and you're gonna get them, or
Exactly.
reach their understanding. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's why all is mind.
Oh, whoa.
I love it.
I love
We
it.
can we can now see what ripples back and play with that. And then that's why I feel like it's this playful energy, trying to get that to ripple back more and more versus all the other stuff that, is rippling back due to other things planted in the reality field, right?
Yes. Yes. Oh boy. That was what a crazy 2, 3 years. Four, coming on four.
Yeah. Yeah. It really has been.